Hello and welcome. You're watching the Daily Report for the last day of the year 2021. Now, December 31st also marks the day 2 years ago when China's authorities alerted the global health body to the presence of what we now know as COVID-19. We have details on that later on. Here first is the broader pandemic coverage with our Kwon. So how is Korea ending its second year amid COVID-19?
Well, Sunny, South Korea is ending the last day of this year as well as the work week with a decline in COVID-19 infections compared to the day before, with 4,875 infections tallied as of 12 a.m. And that includes 4,758 domestic transmissions and 117 cases from abroad. Around 70% of the nation's cases are still occurring in the capital region, but we've also got 5 other places that are seeing triple-digit figures this Friday, including Busan with 260 new infections. Now, it's been a decline in cases in the past day, as you can see here, but also an on-week drop from over 6,200 cases that we had last Friday. And Korea has also posted 108 new fatalities related to the COVID-19 infections, and the total number stands at above 630,800. Just to make a comparison, compared to exactly a year ago, that's when we surpassed 60,000 cases, and also we had a little under 1,000 infections. So number-wise, it is a more dire situation than last year, but the difference from last year is that we are having vaccinations, and we've got now 86.1% of the nation's population that received at least one COVID-19 vaccine dose, and 82.8% their second shot or are fully considered fully vaccinated, while the booster shot campaign is also under process, with now 34.4% of the nation's population having received that additional dose. Now let's move over to the figures abroad, but before we do that, we are seeing that the number of patients that are in severe or critical conditions stands still at above 1,000. And now let's take a look at the global numbers. We are seeing an increase in cases. Almost more than 1.95 million new infections were reported in the span of a day as of noon Korea time, and that because the Omicron variant is rampantly spreading in many parts of the world, with 7,347 new fatalities reported as well. Now, here are the 20 countries with the highest accumulated caseloads, and I also want to make a comparison to last year here. The US, India, Brazil, these countries were countries that were making the top 3 just a year ago as well. But now we're seeing many European countries with more Omicron variants, which is also why there are especially spreading cases in the UK, and also Spain here, which has now surpassed Iran in the past day with its total caseload. And those are the general updates that I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for the global tallies over the past 24 hours. On the local front, authorities have decided to extend current prevention guidelines for 2 more weeks. Shin Yeon is here with details on that. Yeon, welcome back.
Great to be here, Sunny.
Right, now let's begin with news about the extension in social restrictions.
Right, so we are going to be extending measures, and these measures entail limiting social gatherings to 4 people and closing most public facilities at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. On December 18th, the country pumped the brakes on its gradual return to normal scheme. Instead, distancing restrictions have been toughened. Originally, these restrictions were to be in effect until Sunday on January 2nd. Now, these measures will be extended till January 16th, meaning they'll stay in effect for an extra 2 weeks.
Right, Yeon. And I assume this latest decision by authorities here is being denounced by small business owners.
Definitely it has been, and business owners have repeatedly warned that social gathering caps and business hour restrictions are putting their livelihoods at risk. That's why the government has been handing out relief funds worth around $840 to each business owner. Apart from this, on Friday, authorities said they will also provide in advance a separate compensation package to merchants most affected by the restrictions. Some 550,000 self-employed people will receive some $4,200 each as part of this program, and the actual assessment of their losses and follow-up compensation will be made later.
Meanwhile, Yoon, I understand requirements for vaccine passes have been extended, is it?
Yes, they have. Vaccine passes have been extended to department stores and large supermarkets to give businesses some time to get up to speed. A one-week grace period will be in effect from January 10th, and authorities have also decided to delay the adoption of vaccine pass requirements for teenagers entering public facilities by 1 month. Now, the decision to push the date back from February to March comes as around 30% of teens aged 12 to 17 still have not received their first COVID-19 shot. Even in March, a 1-month grace period will be provided before the vaccine pass mandate for this age group comes into full effect. And in regards to all these new measures set for the beginning of 2022, the Prime Minister called for more patience from the nation's people. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We will use the extra 2 weeks to renew our medical capacity so that we can tackle the Omicron variant. We ask everyone to bear with us a little more so that we can return to normal life in the new year.
Right, and beyond our borders, Yoon, how are countries responding to the surge in cases fueled by the Delta and Omicron variants?
Right, if I take Italy, for example, they've rolled out measures to minimize disruptions to the economy even amid its chaotic COVID-19 situation. Authorities on Wednesday said they would provide quarantine exceptions to fully vaccinated residents, booster shot recipients, and patients who've recovered from COVID-19 within the last 120 days if they come into contact with a COVID-19 patient. The country will also expand its so-called Super Green Pass to all forms of public transport from January 10th. And other European countries like France, Portugal, Germany, and Northern Ireland have ordered nightclubs to shut down, meaning there will be no New Year's parties at clubs this year. The U.S. is also set on adding fuel to its booster shot campaign, as local news outlets reported the FDA is expected to broaden eligibility for Pfizer boosters to children aged 12 to 15 in the coming days.
I see. All right, Yoon, as always, thank you for now, but stay for the extended talks. And for the most recent remarks regarding Korea's COVID-19 situation by authorities here, I have Soa back at the desk. Soa.
Yes, Sunny. So the government held an extensive briefing on details regarding the extension of the social distancing measures that Yeon briefed us on before. Let's first take a listen to Health Minister Kwon Duk-cheol's remarks on why the lengthening of the rules was inevitable.
현재까지 밝혀진 정보가 부족하여
The lack of information currently available is hampering our ability to systematically analyse and respond to the threat of the Omicron variant. We need more time to properly evaluate the risks and get ourselves prepared. We collected a range of opinions from medical experts and others from all levels of our society. Most of them believe that it's dangerous to be easing our restrictions right now, and that we must keep our gradual return to normal on hold and endure for the time being.
Now, apart from what the regular citizens have to endure for a little while longer, the minister laid out the government's additional efforts to further stabilize the situation, which will include the continuous expansion of hospital beds, including close to 1,600 ICU beds until the end of January. He furthermore vowed for thorough preparations to make oral treatment pills available also by the end of January for use at residential treatment centers, as well as people being treated at home with systemized prescription and delivery. The government will also make sure to continue its vaccination drive, especially focused on booster shots for senior citizens and teenage inoculations. Regarding the Omicron variant, authorities will make assessments based on trends abroad and prepare for a comprehensive response system, which is likely to involve a higher dependency on home treatment.
Right, so speaking of Omicron, what's the latest on that front?
Well, Sunny, Korea has reported 269 new Omicron variant cases as of 12 a.m. this Friday, by far the highest daily caseload here in the nation. The latest record was 109 cases 2 days ago. But this is not a surprise because as yesterday, the country started to use a new homegrown PCR test that can detect the Omicron variant within 3 to 4 hours, which earlier took 3 to 5 days, as the variant had to be distinguished from other strains through an additional genetic sequencing analysis. Korea accumulated almost 900 Omicron cases since its first confirmation on December 1st. Out of the most recent new cases, 186 were imported cases from more than 20 countries, including 131, so around 7 out of 10 from the US, followed by 19 cases from the UK, 9 from France, and 5 from Canada. Meanwhile, as of Thursday, there were 6 Omicron-related cluster infections added, including at a military base in Gyeonggi-do Province and an elementary school in Gwangju, raising the total to 21 suspected group infections, that is.
Right, in elementary school. So, well, medical experts here on our show have said that the relatively lower vaccination rate, that is, among teenagers, renders them very vulnerable to infection. But regardless, as Yeon mentioned earlier, I understand vaccine pass requirements for teenagers have been delayed.
Right, and that is why there were questions raised at the government briefing earlier. If we are having these higher risks, especially due to the Omicron variant, why are they making this extension? Is this okay at this point? But as Yen said, it is also the low vaccination rates compared to adults is what some people have been asking for why they are delaying this period. But they mentioned that there are also other factors like exam periods in January and also vaccine supply issues as well as parents' opinion. So this is a combination of these issues why the government has made this decision to extend the period and also the grace period of another month. And that's also because cram schools have to adapt to such systems as well. Now, regarding the vaccine pass system, there was also the question on department stores and the big supermarkets, which have been also put on the list of places where you need this vaccine pass system. So while there is a grace period for places at these department stores and supermarkets, and then it starts on January 10th, people are asking then if the social distancing measures are extended until the 16th, does it mean just for 6 days whether we have to use this system at department stores and big supermarkets? But regarding this, government officials have said that the vaccine pass system's expansion is separate from the extension of the social distancing measures, which means at these department stores and other venues that have been added, this system, the vaccine system, is expected to be extended even further than that.
Right, so the vaccine requirement system itself then.
Yes.
Right then, let's end our talk today, Yeon, with a cautious look ahead to the new year. We'll start with the prospects overseas then.
Right, based on the current rate of infections, we can say that 2022 will get off to a rough start, especially in Europe, where we're seeing a record high surge in COVID-19 figures. On Thursday, we saw the COVID-19 death toll in Eastern Europe surpass 1 million. 3 countries in particular have reported a notable surge in deaths. They're Russia, Poland, and Ukraine. Meanwhile, Western Europe has also struggled with the spread of the Omicron variant. France saw caseloads surpass the 200,000 mark yet again. Over 206,000 new COVID-19 infections were added. And Italy also reported a new high of over 126,000 cases on Thursday, with hospital admissions also on the rise. And that's why the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control has advised people once more to avoid non-essential travel to almost every EU member state.
Right, I see. What about here on the domestic front, Soa?
Well, Sunny, uncertainties remain, and this is why these social distancing rules have also been extended. But there are also some positive factors that officials are looking at in the upcoming year. And let's take a listen to Son Young-ne, an official who had an assessment on this issue.
Some of the positive takeaways include the development of COVID-19 pills, Korea's purchase of these treatments, and the fact that our nation's people have become much more aware of COVID-19 and also more experienced in learning how to protect themselves. Despite the uncertainties, the government will do its best to ensure a closer resemblance to normality in the year ahead, through its strong determination to push forward in this regard.
Now, some government data, meanwhile, is suggesting if we are ruling out the Omicron variant and we continue with the current social distancing measures, there is a possibility that daily infections drop to between 2,700 and 3,100 by the end of January. So that would be positive development. However, if the Omicron variant becomes the dominant strain, this data suggests that infections could even rise to around 14,000 a day. So let's hope that this will not happen, but this is what is possible.
Right, I see. All right, so as always, thank you very much for the updates. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And Yeon, also see you in the year 2022.
See you then.
Topping our headlines at this hour, as part of efforts to entrench a younger generation into politics, lawmakers here have passed a bill that paves the path for people as young as 18 to run for office in the National Assembly and local government. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
From next year, those interested in a career as politics, as young as high school seniors, can be elected a member of South Korea's National Assembly. On Friday, celebrating the last day of 2021, with a plenary session, lawmakers amended the Public Official Election Act to lower electoral eligibility from 25 years old to 18 for members of the National Assembly, local council, and heads of local government.
This really means a lot to lower the age after 73 years when 25 was decided in 1948.
There's a big expectation for the ripple effect this will bring our political developments and political reform, further strengthening the dynamism of our society and social innovation.
But the unilateral move to pass this legislation comes just around 2 months ahead of the presidential election, which some experts claim could be seen as the two major parties seeking the votes of the younger generation. In this first election following the passing of the law, there will be 5 vacant parliamentary seats that need to be filled. As for eligibility for the presidential race, you will need to be at least 40 if you want to run for the top position. In the meantime, lawmakers also passed 35 other pieces of legislation, including the extension of the working period of a special committee on media system improvement to May 2022. In addition, it was also agreed to form a special committee supporting the country's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in the southern port city of Busan. The next plenary session will come on January 11th and is expected to deal with legislation for compensating small businesses that are suffering from the imposed COVID-19 restrictions. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, Korea's inflation has soared above projections by the central bank and the government to average 2.5% this year, the highest in a decade. Our Kim Sung-min has more.
South Korea in 2021 saw its highest level of consumer inflation in 10 years. Statistics Korea said on Friday that its consumer price index for this year was at 102.5, up 2.5% on year. That's far higher than the annual inflation for the previous 2 years, which stayed at around 0.5%. The agency cited surging global oil prices as well as a rebound in demand as reasons for the high inflation. This also comes as the inflation index from October to December stayed above 3%, bringing the average figure up.
This follows the pattern of the surge in global oil prices, which in general increasingly rose towards the end of the year. The prices of agricultural and fisheries products showed an upward trend in November and December.
By sector, the prices of agricultural and fisheries products, which largely contributed to the high inflation all throughout the year, showed a strong finish of 8.7% on year. That was the highest for the sector in 10 years. Prices of eggs rose more than 41% and spring onion 38%. Rises in prices of industrial goods hit a 9-year high of 2.3%, and service prices also saw the biggest surge in 4 years. The agency expects high inflationary pressure will continue into the new year, driven by both global oil and raw material prices. The global supply chain issue is also expected to remain as an upside risk. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, across the inter-Korean border, Pyongyang's key ruling party conference appears to have entered a 5th day on this Friday, making it the longest under Kim Jong-un's reign. Our Kim Da-mi tells us more.
North Korea on Thursday discussed a draft resolution which could include a new foreign policy for the new year. The North state media reported the 4th day of the 4th plenary meeting involved sectional workshops to lay out ideas to include in the draft resolution, adding that the event will go on. Pyongyang appeared to have reviewed a policy direction for South Korea and the U.S. on the previous day. After finalizing a draft resolution on Thursday, the North is expected to officially adopt the new policy directions at the end of the ongoing Key Party meeting. Details have yet to be disclosed. But observers say it's highly likely the regime will announce the details on January 1st, along with a speech by leader Kim Jong-un, which will replace his annual New Year's Day address, as was the case in 2019. This week's plenary session, which now heads into the 5th day, is the longest one ever under the Kim Jong-un regime. Experts know such an unusually long plenary meeting is to set a solid, substantial goals to achieve actual results and to guarantee execution. Strengthening internal solidarity also seems to be one of the North's intentions by holding a year-end plenary meeting and revealing new detailed plans at the beginning of the year. A reshuffle of the party's leadership is expected to be discussed on the final day of the event. 김다미, Arirang News.
Amid U.S. intelligence reports that Russia may invade Ukraine in January, Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin engaged in a 50-minute phone call on Thursday. Our Lee Kyung-un reports.
U.S. President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone for nearly an hour on Thursday amid growing tensions over Russia's troop buildup near Ukraine. The phone call, requested by Putin, is their second conversation in a month. Neither side released any details immediately, but both leaders reportedly restated their previous stances. According to White House spokesperson, Biden made clear that the U.S. and its allies will respond decisively if Russia invades Ukraine. Based on what senior officials told reporters, they will mean one of the two paths laid out by Biden, which may include economic sanctions and strengthening NATO's force posture. The other is diplomacy and de-escalation, which is in line with Washington's continued push to solve the issue diplomatically. Meanwhile, according to Reuters, Putin's foreign affairs advisor said that in response to Biden's warning of new sanctions, Putin made a warning of his own. Putin reportedly said that such a move by the U.S. would be a huge mistake that will entail grave consequences. According to AP, Russia has also restated its demand for security guarantees from the U.S. and NATO, including banning NATO from expanding further east and not allowing Ukraine to join the alliance. In the end, the U.S. official said no conclusions were drawn from the talks. Putin has not clarified whether he will invade or back down, and it is also unclear what Biden will be willing to offer Putin in exchange for defusing the crisis. It remains to be seen whether the two sides can reach an agreement in Geneva next month when working-level talks will be held. Young-eun, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. As the world readies itself to welcome in the new year, major venues hosting New Year's Eve celebrations are preparing for the festivities. This includes the famous Times Square, where its New Year's Eve ball went up the 130-foot pole on Thursday for a test run. The ball is being illuminated by over 32,000 energy-efficient LEDs and enhanced by 2,688 crystal triangles. Visitors looking to be a part of the celebration at Times Square will be able to enter from 3 p.m. on Friday local time, but only after showing proof of full vaccination and a valid ID. They will also be required to wear masks during the celebrations. While Times Square used to host 58,000 people before the pandemic, it will only allow 15,000 this year. London's iconic Big Ben was also preparing for its New Year's Eve celebrations on Thursday, as the clock bell got ready for ringing in the new year with 12 bongs. However, with the Omicron variant wreaking havoc in Europe, London's firework display and traditional concert that usually draws in thousands of people onto the streets has been cancelled. Iran has successfully used a satellite-launched rocket to send 3 research devices into space. According to the country's defense ministry on Thursday, the Simorgh satellite carrier rockets, whose name translates to Phoenix, launched the 3 research devices to an altitude of 470 kilometers. The latest launch comes as Iran, who touts one of the biggest missile programs in the Middle East, suffered several failed satellite launches in the past few years due to technical issues. The launch also comes as the U.S. imposed sanctions on Iran's civilian space agency and two research organizations in 2019, accusing them of being used to advance Tehran's ballistic missile program. Iran has long denied the allegations. Tesla is recalling more than 475,000 of its cars to address rear-view camera and trunk issues that increase the risk of crashing. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the models under the recall are Model 3 and Model S cars. The U.S. road safety regulators say for Model 3 sedans, the rear-view camera cable harness may be damaged by the opening and closing of the trunk lid, preventing the rear-view camera image from displaying, while the Model S vehicle's front hood latch problems may lead to its trunk to open without warning and obstruct the driver's visibility, increasing the risk of a crash. Tesla also recalled 135,000 cars in February, and authorities opened a formal safety probe into its driver assistance system autopilot in August after a series of crashes. 이승재, Arirang News.
It's the last Friday of this year and also time for a check on the regional events that made global headlines this week. I have Kim Sang-yeon here in the studio. Sang-yeon, welcome back.
Great to see you on New Year's Eve, Sunny. So this week there was quite a bit of coverage, international coverage on President Park Geun-hye, former President Park Geun-hye, who was granted a special pardon last Friday. We did have stories also on Squid Game as well as just Korean culture in general, and also Korea's preparations to join a mega trade deal. And lastly, reports on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who is presiding over a major party meeting in North Korea throughout the week. So let's dive right in. Ousted former President Park Geun-hye is set to be released from prison after spending more than 4 years of her 22-year sentence, with the decision coming just 3 months ahead of next year's presidential election. The Guardian noted that President Moon Jae-in's decision to grant a special pardon to the former leader could have a bearing on the March 9th election, especially given her influence among conservative voters. It suggested that her release could trigger a split in the conservative vote, with many supporters having lost faith in Park over her power abuse scandal. And in the meantime, the Associated Press noted it wasn't immediately clear how the pardon would affect voter sentiment, but quoted one expert who said that releasing a disgraced former leader from prison has many precedents in Korean politics, so it's not an unusual event and hence unlikely to have a significant impact on the candidates and public opinions.
Right. Sang-yeon, now this next item is something Arirang News covered as well this week, the soaring interest in Korean productions among global streaming platforms. Tell us more.
Right, Sunny, so quite a bit of international coverage on this indeed, as basically the hunt is on for the next Squid Game, and Netflix as well as Apple and Disney are now looking to ride the wave of the global interest in K-dramas. So Korea is becoming a content battleground among global streaming services as expectations are high for Korea's television industry to keep delivering more successful content. The Wall Street Journal highlighted that Squid Game broadened the horizon of K-content, establishing higher global expectations for repeated success. The journal goes on to explain that 4 of Netflix's 6 most-watched non-English language television series were Korean productions. This success has earned Korea a reputation of creating top-quality shows on tight budgets, which has attracted the interest of other platforms like Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus. In the meantime, Bloomberg also wrote a report about the recent boom in Korean products in the aftermath of Squid Game, BTS, as well as Oscar-winning film Parasite. It says the global success of K-content has had a huge knock-on effect on the popularity of all things Korean. Bloomberg went into much detail, listing a number of once unknown brands and goods that are coming into the mainstream in various countries around the world.
Right, good to know. So, on the economic front, Korea is looking to join a giant trade partnership, right?
Yes, so as we know, Sunny, the Korean government earlier this month started discussions on a trade deal, precisely the process of joining the CPTPP framework. And in an interview with Nikkei, Trade Minister Yeo Han-gu said Korea is now ready to meet the standards required to join that mega trade deal. So Bloomberg noted that the trade minister's comments also coincide with requests from China and Taiwan to join the CPTPP. Minister Yeo was cited as saying that Korea has been preparing for the past 8 years to join the TPP and that it would revitalize the economic ties between Korea and Japan in particular. The minister emphasized the importance of economic and supply chain cooperation between the two sides as investments by Japanese companies in Korea have steadily increased over the years. Another report by the Financial Times indicated that Korea's decision to join the agreement follows a general transition towards multilateral trade deals, which Korea has traditionally chosen not to join. Minister Yeo told the Financial Times that Korea has much to offer to this CPTPP framework as a high-tech industrial powerhouse, particularly in areas like semiconductors and batteries as well.
Right, Sonia, let's end in North Korea, where a key party conference is underway, right?
Yes, so in North Korea, leader Kim Jong-un opened a key ruling party meeting on Monday earlier this week, and that's a forum he has previously used to make major policy announcements for the new year. So on Monday, Kim convened the 4th plenary meeting of the 8th Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, and the meeting, according to KCNA, has reviewed state and party policies of 2021, as well as discussed future strategies going forward in the new year. The Asahi Shimbun noted that the gathering comes as North Korea grapples with a serious economic crisis brought on by lockdowns due to the COVID-19 pandemic, on top of international sanctions as well as natural disasters. Moreover, Kim may be under pressure to deliver on his promises to improve the livelihoods of his people as he marks the 10-year anniversary of his rule. The report further hinted that around the New Year holiday period, Kim has often used speeches to make major policy announcements, as well as friendly overtures to the U.S. and South Korea. So far at the meeting, Kim has urged agriculture reforms to fight food shortages amid the pandemic.
Right. Right then, Sangyeon, as always, thank you very much for your coverage, and I'll see you in the new year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
It was on December 31st, 2019, when Chinese authorities informed the World Health Organization about a number of pneumonia cases of unknown cause in Wuhan. Well, it's been 2 years since then, and the global fight against COVID-19 continues. For more, here in the studio, I have Dr. Kim Seung-taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. Welcome back, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
I also have Professor David Dowdy at Johns Hopkins University live on the line. It's good to see you again, Professor Dowdy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Also joining the session virtually is Professor Marcel Cullen at Oregon Health and Science University. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Professor Cullen.
It's an honor to join you. Thank you.
Right, Dr. Kim, we'll start here in the studio. The World Health Organization has warned that the simultaneous spread of Omicron and Delta is fueling a tsunami of cases. What does this mean? What does this warning, that is, mean for pandemic containment efforts?
Well, as you can see, the Delta and then the Omicron are the two main the variants actually circulating right now. But as we have seen some other countries like US and Europe, I think in the probably in the near future, the Omicron will just predominant as the main the variant so far. And I think in terms of this the viral just a pandemic, we have to actually somehow just consider the effect in terms of like the diagnostics and then the quarantine and also the vaccine and then the therapeutics. And well, at least just luckily for in our side, we as of just yesterday, now we have just very good diagnostic tools which can actually distinguish the Omicron variant compared to some of the variants. So which is going to be actually very helpful for ours as a quarantine just a procedure. And for the vaccine part, I think the Omicron is actually now just showing now our the vaccine that we are using right now has a very reduced efficacy, at least for some antibody responses. And for the therapeutics, we have had a pretty good just a monoclonal antibody, but now just Omicron, the neutralizing antibody of our monoclonal antibody seems to be very reduced, except for the one monoclonal antibody which was actually developed by the VOI technology and the GSK, although just reduced, but compared to other monoclonal antibody, it still seems to have just retained pretty good just efficacy against the Omicron variant. And then also now we have some oral drugs available, which might actually help a lot for our just quarantine procedure and then just dealing with the current situation.
Of course, hopefully.
Sure.
Professor Dowdy, over in the US this past Wednesday, the country reportedly noted well over 500,000 new infections. How do you assess the current situation there in the US?
Yeah, and we saw another 500,000 just yesterday as well. So I think in terms of case counts, we're seeing really the highest numbers we've ever seen. Well over our last peak of winter, almost twice as high as what we saw a year ago. But we're still not seeing quite the same level of hospitalizations and deaths. So our hospitalization levels are about 2/3 of what they were last winter at this time. And our death rates are only about a half. And so while we're seeing more cases, those cases do seem to be milder. So I think there's real concern about disruption of the workforce, and in some places, some overloading of hospitals as well. But it's not quite as bad, I would say, as what we were seeing last winter.
Right. Professor Carlin, meanwhile, I believe you co-authored a study that shows breakthrough infections generate antibodies that are as much as 1,000% more effective than the antibodies generated 2 weeks after a second Pfizer dose. What do you suppose are the implications of your finding?
Sonny, that's right. What we did was compare those people who have had 2 doses of the vaccine and no history of infection with similarly matched individuals who have had the vaccination and then went on to get COVID itself. What we saw was, in all cases, mild disease, but as you point out, the antibody responses were much, much greater in that group that had been vaccinated and then had gone on to get COVID. I think the implication is fairly straightforward in that as the epidemic moves on and more cases accrue, hopefully those cases will be mild. As Dr. Dowdy points out, the hospitalization rate is lower. And we're trying, meanwhile, to vaccinate more and more people. So as the epidemic progresses, we're going to get a larger population of people that fall into this category where they have much stronger immune responses. The one additional nuance to add is that these immune responses are much greater in their strength, but they're also broader, which means they're better able to neutralize other variants. If you got infected with Delta, you're still much better able to neutralize Alpha or some of the other variants in this category. So maybe we'll be better protected from future waves after Omicron.
Professor Carlin, do you suppose you're finding questions perhaps the logic of offering booster shots to those who have perhaps endured breakthrough infections? What are your thoughts?
Right. So our study certainly does not provide any. Some people ask, well, if you're going to get better immune response after infection, why not just avoid vaccination altogether? So our data provide no argument whatsoever to avoid vaccinations. To the contrary, we advise everyone to get 2 doses and a booster if they possibly can. We haven't specifically studied yet 2 doses plus a booster compared with booster followed by infection. So that's the next logical comparison to make, and we're working on that now.
Right. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim, a study in South Africa shows Omicron infection may offer greater protection against the Delta variant. What are the implications of this particular finding?
Well, I think, as Dr. Collins said, somehow just the infection does seem to just confer a very broad just protection, and I think that the vaccines actually just very superior right now, but then even just the natural infection actually confers some immunity, and in this case, this immunity is like even after just completing just twice shot of our just mRNA vaccines or just virus vectored vaccine. Now the breakthrough infection seems to just confer some booster effect. So this is kind of just so additional things, and then as Dr. Collins said, I'm just re-emphasizing that this natural infection seems to confer broadly just immunity, because our vaccine, in fact, the vaccine actually only just provides a spike protein as a antigen vaccine, but for this real virus infection actually just provide all sorts of different viral protein, which actually can probably just induce very broad response from our infected body.
I see. Meanwhile, Professor Dowdy, the emergence of Omicron itself has prompted quite a number of predictions about the fate of COVID-19. Now, I'd like to know about the thoughts of our panelists regarding the matter, and perhaps we could start with you, Professor Dowdy. Do you believe Omicron will turn this pandemic endemic?
Well, I think it's a little early to call anything endemic when we're seeing the highest case rates of all time, at least in this country. But I do think that what we've seen in other countries like South Africa, for example, is that these Omicron-related spikes can be relatively short and can increase levels of immunity in the population. So I think that there is hope that we will get to an endemic state soon, but I think we still need to ride out this wave first, and I think it's going to be at least a few more weeks before we're there.
Right. Dr. Kim, what are the chances then of yet another variant of concern after Omicron?
Well, still just there is some possibility. Well, there is obviously some kind of restriction, because the virus has to somehow survive, actually, depending on the host environment. Virus does not just survive by themselves. They need some sort of factories given by the host proteins. So as long as they actually depend on the host factors, they are actually somehow may just find a way to just evolve even more. And then in terms of this evolving viruses, sometimes people say, well, maybe more upcoming viruses may be just more contagious but less fatal. But this kind of a general consensus among many epidemiologists and virologists. But this is not all 100% true, because there are some exceptions. For example, like smallpox virus. That was actually eradicated from the planet just a long time ago. But that for several years, this smallpox virus did not show any such kind of a trend. And even for a yellow fever virus, did not show any such kind of trend. So we cannot just say 100% that maybe contagiousness and the fatality just moving that only one specific way.
Right, hence Professor Dowdy's cautious outlook then. Right. Professor Carlin, the World Health Organization says the acute phase of this pandemic may end next year, but the coronavirus is not likely to disappear. Do you share this outlook?
Right, I agree with my colleagues in suggesting some caution. I do have a little bit of optimism that as our immunity increases and as the virus evolves, as Dr. Kim is pointing out, the virus has to evolve and make changes in order to be able to infect new hosts. And as new hosts become more immune, the virus has to make compromises in order to avoid the immune responses that are pre-existing. And so the logic of all of those two things may be that we're going to see successively milder waves that maybe spread widely but are less severe. If that happens, that would point the way towards an endemic more than a pandemic kind of scenario. So that's my hope. I think we're seeing right now the earliest indications that this might be true. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that maybe if we talk again in 6 months, we'll look back on December as somewhat of a turning point in the pandemic.
Hopefully that will be the case, Professor Carlin. Now, Professor Dowdy, how do you respond to the shortened isolation period for COVID-19 patients amid the resurgence in daily cases?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is a really challenging question, and I think that our CDC director, for example, has taken a lot of heat for shortening the periods of quarantine and isolation. I do think that we have to acknowledge that we are dealing with a virus that is now, in most cases, milder. And so even though there may be some level of infectivity at the tail end of people's infectious period, that's not when the majority of transmission is occurring. So I actually tend to support the shortening of the isolation and quarantine periods, but I can understand why some people would have reservations about doing so.
Right. Dr. Kim, come next year, Korea's COVID-19 strategy will place priority on easing the number of severe illness and fatality. Now, how does this stance look to affect Omicron containment?
I think just the Omicron variant would not just change our government's general the direction. I mean, generally we are actually just moving forward to just returning to just normal life. And then the reason is that it's actually just basically the same as we started some living with COVID-19. The vaccination rate is that time was close to 70%. Now just 80% of the full vaccination. And also now, fortunately now we have some oral drugs available. So now we have some more weapons to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then also for last 2 years, we kind of our government was pretty successful in terms of quarantine, but quarantine did not come without any sacrifice. That sacrifice was demanded from mostly some small business owners, and we cannot ask for those kind of sacrifices from any small and a certain group of people from our country. So then this kind of some compromise, as long as we have some vaccination is in real world, we are actually accomplishing the full vaccination, and then with some additional weapons, we can deal with some viruses. Now, our general our movement will be on the returning to the normal life. Somehow, living with the COVID-19.
Right, a new normal then.
Right, exactly.
Professor Carlin, what are your words of advice now for the year ahead as we seek to contain COVID-19 worldwide? I understand over in the US, everyone knows someone who has COVID-19. It's a very dismal situation there. Keeping that in mind, what are your words of advice?
Yeah, I have two things to say about this. One is perhaps that I'm hoping we'll see some light at the end of the tunnel. It's important to remember that although we're dealing with a new variant of COVID, it's still the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and it spreads the way it does, but primarily by droplets that people inhale. And so wearing a mask is the simplest and best way to prevent getting infection. If you haven't been vaccinated yet, that's a great thing to do now, is to get vaccinated and then get boosted. But the last thing I would say is that the pandemic has, of course, generated a lot of fear and emotions ride high, particularly for folks who are vulnerable, older folks or people who are have underlying illnesses and are vulnerable to severe disease. And unfortunately, in the U.S., it has also contributed to sort of a climate of divisiveness and polarization that so many other issues have fallen into as well. What I would say there is that we're all in the same boat, and I think the diversity of views and opinions that we all have and the various ideas we have are a real strength rather than a reason to be divided. And so we rely on these ideas, and I think we should all try to pull together to end the pandemic as best we can.
Right. And Professor Dowdy, what do you believe perhaps then may serve as the biggest variable against containment efforts in the year 2022?
I think that this is going to really come down to some of the things that Dr. Carlin and Dr. Kim have already been talking about as well. Is this immunity that we have built up through vaccinations, through seeing different waves, is this immunity going to be broad enough and strong enough to dampen down future waves, or are we going to continue to see waves as we're seeing right now, particularly in the winter? And then is this going to be something that is predictably seasonal, so we can give people a shot in the winter just like we do for the flu? Or is this going to be something that also has less predictable summer waves? I think a lot of these questions are still outstanding and really will probably determine the course of the pandemic for the next few years.
You're right. Professor Dowdy, it seems like there's so many questions and so few answers from what you've said, of course. Now, Dr. Kim, here in the studio, here on the local front, what looks to possibly perhaps challenge our efforts to contain COVID-19 next year?
I think this is not just confined to our own situation. Maybe this is extend to some global situation. And then number one is the variant of concern. And although we do not want to just more just the variant, I mean just more than just Omicron, but we cannot actually rule out any emergence of any potential just the variant. I mean, especially this Omicron variant, based on some phylogenetic analysis. I mean, just some genetic analysis. This seems to stems from a very different just the origin compared to the prior just the variants. And then other things are actually just more the vaccine options. And then first of all is I think just Novavax vaccine will be available just pretty soon. And especially the EU and the WHO also just approved for the Novavax vaccine. And this vaccine is basically just based on some very traditional just the way of vaccination. So many people now, at least just for example, even in my case, many people around myself actually expecting this vaccine. And then maybe this vaccine seems to be just less just side effects compared to the virus vector vaccine and also some mRNA-based vaccines. So once it is available, maybe I expect more people are actually just willing to get vaccinated with this specific type of vaccine. And then also maybe just we are actually just more just a comprehensive, extensive just vaccination. For example, like now, just the Korean government also just considering the more vaccination, even including some children with the ages 5 to just the 12. And also for some globally, now just the Pfizer actually has conducted some phase 2 or just a twice shot of the Pfizer vaccine. But that's actually based on the 6 months age to just 5 years. But then they actually reduced the amount of just mRNA, now just 3 micrograms. But our just regular just amount of RNA, the mRNA is the 30 microgram. Now just the last just the 10 microgram. Now just this group is 3 microgram. But with this, after the two shots, their actually immune response wasn't really just satisfactory. So the Pfizer now is just considering the third shot for this group of just people. And so this is gonna maybe if it is successful, maybe we can just expand the some vaccination group. And then lastly, now we're going to have just the oral drugs. Although just the Pfizer drug seems to be very just promising, but the molnupiravir, this is a Merck drug. The final just analysis of phase 3 clinical trials is a little bit just disappointing, but this could be some alternative option in addition to the Pfizer drug.
I see. Yeah. All right, Dr. Kim, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts here in the studio. Professor Colin Irvin in the US, thank you very much for your time. Happy New Year. Professor Dowdy, also thank you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Right, well, it is the last day of the year 2021. For those of you who cannot be with your family and friends, do take time to send them your thoughts. And for those of you lucky enough to be with your loved ones, do take care against COVID-19. Happy New Year.